Okay. So let me give Valeria.
Hola, good morning, buenos días.
Buenos días, Valeria.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Cuando desees.
¿Comenzamos, les parece?
¿Sí?
Sí. Ok, buenos días con todos, bienvenidos. Mi nombre es Valeria Ochoa, yo soy la codirectora del Instituto Biosfera de la Universidad San Francisco de Quito. Reciban un cordial saludo de todos los que hacemos Biosfera y la USFQ. Para nosotros es un enorme placer estar el día de hoy aquí hablando sobre un tema tan importante y trascendental para el mundo como es el cambio climático. Este evento ha sido posible gracias a la colaboración y el esfuerzo de varias instituciones que me gustaría empezar reconociendo. Esto es Produbanco, unidos con la Ciencia por el Planeta, Buen Plan y el Instituto Biosfera. Y sin más que decir, es un enorme placer presentarles a Carolina Landín, quien es gerente de sostenibilidad del Produbanco, para que nos presente a nuestro invitado de honor, el doctor Richard Alley. Caro, por favor.
Ya le estamos dando a Caro el audio.
Muchas gracias, Vale, por la introducción. Qué gusto saludarlos a todos el día de hoy y tenerlos en este espacio que hemos creado realmente para ustedes, para poder compartir con este experto mundial de alto nivel en un tema que realmente nos desafía a todos. La Agenda 2030 y su avance en el cumplimiento de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible es un tema que sin duda nos desafía. Y el cambio climático nos afecta a todos, con grandes impactos ambientales, económicos y sociales. Este fenómeno además demuestra esta vulnerabilidad que tenemos como humanidad ante acontecimientos globales. Recientemente estamos viviendo esta pandemia mundial que a todo el mundo nos ha puesto en jaque, pero demuestra esta interdependencia que tenemos como países y esta responsabilidad compartida. Y es importante que hagamos conciencia de la responsabilidad que tenemos como individuos y como sector privado. Y por eso es que hemos querido invitarles a este espacio y sin más, quiero y tengo el gusto de poder invitar al doctor Richard Alley, geólogo de Estados Unidos, para más considerado uno de los principales investigadores mundiales sobre el cambio climático. Richard, thank you for your time and for sharing with us a bit of your experience regarding climate change. It's an honor and a privilege for us to welcome you today, and thank you so much.
Muchas gracias. Thank you. It is really a pleasure to be here. I apologize, my Spanish is not great. I did follow what you were saying, and thank you so much. It is a pleasure. So I am a geologist. I have some background in engineering. I have worked for an oil company. I mostly study ice, Antarctica, Greenland, sea level, and other issues of that sort. So we will, and thanks to Jacob, he's done great things since he was a student in my class. Thanks to Gracias Produbanco, to United for Science, and thank you all for attending today. The penguins are from my trips. They are just for fun. I'm not going to talk about penguins, but they make a hard topic a little easier, I think. So I'm going to tell you some history of energy use in the United States, mistakes that we made. I'm going to tell you how good fossil fuels have been for us. And then I'm going to tell you how much greater good we can get by building a sustainable system. So this is a difficult problem because we're leaving something that is so good to get something which is better. So that's where we want to go here. I want to remind you, Jacob and Valeria and Carolina and I were talking a little earlier about the medical advances. I am speaking to you from the United States. Over these amazing technical advances, we can solve problems. And I have a picture on the left here of what your cell phone looked like, what your mobile looked like before it was built. Right? It's just a little quartz or sand of some sort. It's a little oil. It is the right rocks. And science and engineering and design and marketing and banking, and we can turn this into a cell phone. The GPS really does use Einstein's relativity. And if it did not know relativity, it would begin to get lost in 2 minutes. We needed relativity, we needed quantum mechanics to make sand, oil, and rocks into a mobile phone. We can solve problems, we can solve energy too. And so, just for a comparison, a human diet in the US is 2,000 calories per day. For you, it's 8,400 kilojoules per day. If you burned your food over a day, the energy that comes off is the same as one old light bulb. All of the good that you do is the same energy as one old light bulb. We do not have to make the light bulb work from our food because we're using oil and coal and other sources of energy to light the light bulb and to plow and to heat and cool. And in Ecuador, you average about 15 times as much energy outside of you as inside of you. It is as if each of you has 15 people doing your work. The world average is about 25 times. In the US, it's about 100 times. We love this. It gets us a lot of good. And right now, across the world, it is more than 80% fossil fuels. That's our challenge. We enjoy the good we get from this energy. Right now, it's fossil fuels. We are essentially hunter-gatherers of energy, and we have this history. We burn some energy source much faster than nature makes more. We suffer the pollution, we suffer other problems, we face shortage, we may fight wars over it, and then we find something else to burn. And this is sort of the history of humans, is burn, run out, panic, burn, run out, panic. And I'll show you this from here. So this is the main road into my town. And it goes past this, which is an old iron furnace. My town, my university was founded by iron masters. When the furnace was running 200 years ago, it would have looked like this. They were making iron out of red dirt. And it was fueled by trees made into charcoal. And it looked like this. And it did this. A single iron furnace, and the people that took care of it needed 250 hectares of forest per year. 250 hectares, a square mile of trees per year to run one furnace and its people. And then maybe 50 years until you had enough trees that you could cut them again to keep working. I live in a place called Pennsylvania. If you go to a map of Pennsylvania and you ask, where do we remember the furnaces? every line on here was a furnace or a forge that was using trees and using 250 hectares per year. Every single line on here, plus many more that we've forgotten, 250 hectares of trees per year. And this is what happened. We cut essentially every tree in Pennsylvania. We cut almost every tree in the tree-covered part of the United States of America. And when they tried to grow back, we cut them again. We got rid of almost all of our wildlife. There are now 1 million deer in Pennsylvania. There were essentially none. Our first forester called it the Pennsylvania desert, right? It wasn't a desert, but we had just flattened it. Many parts of China, many parts of Europe, other parts of the world have done this. Trees do not supply everything. How do you work lights before electricity? And rich people used to burn whales. So you send whalers out to kill whales and cook them for oil so that you can see at night. This is the history of whaling in the US. 1800 is on your left, 1880 is on your right. At the peak, so peak whale oil here, there are 10,000 sailors out of the US trying to kill whales. This is a complicated story. The fleet was crushed in the sea ice off of Alaska, and the insurance went through it got very expensive to insure, and so they started to quit. But they also couldn't catch many whales. They were off of Alaska in the sea ice because they had killed all the whales they could catch closer to home. As they got better at whaling, the price went down. That was fairly low. When they hit peak whale oil, the price more than tripled. And then the first modern oil well was drilled just up the road from where I am now. 100 years of US whaling, 10,000 sailors at the peak, got enough oil that it would replace US use today for 11 hours. 100 years of whaling, 11 hours of modern use. We cannot possibly go back. Now, it is true, some whales swam too fast for our sailing ships, and so then Norwegians and Japanese and Russians and others killed them over here. But essentially, we killed all the whales in the ocean for 11 hours of modern oil. But be clear, we have trees and whales because we burn fossil trees, coal, and we burn fossil algae, oil and gas. This is not a new idea. This is something that was published in the magazine Vanity Fair in the year 1861. It is the grand ball given by the whales in honor of the discovery of the oil wells in Pennsylvania. This was just before our Civil War, so may the oil wells never secede. We wail no more for our blubber. Oil's well that ends well. We allowed the whales and trees to grow back because we have oil. The whales and trees grew back in 100 years. The oil will grow back in 100 million years. There is no possibility of building a sustainable world on fossil fuels. It cannot happen. We can either learn and transition now, or we can burn it all, run out, have panics, and then change. But if we burn it first, we will change the climate in ways that make us very unhappy. And so that's where I'll go. And I'm not going to spend much time on this. The physics of how our fossil fuel changes the climate were known in the 1800s. They were really refined by the US Air Force after World War II, because CO2 interferes with the view of a heat-seeking missile, just the same as CO2 interferes with energy transfer from the Earth to space. It's the same physics. It is the physics of night vision goggles. It is the physics of detecting energy leaks from a building. There's no question about this. There's no other side. If you launch a satellite and look down at the Earth, this is the Earth sending energy back to space. This is energy that does not get out because of CO2. And more CO2, more does not get out. And it's really this simple. It is predictive. It is well known. There's no alternative. The warming effect of the CO2 from our fossil fuels was figured out in 1896 by Arrhenius. He calculated it. He got his economics wrong. He did not think we would ever burn as much fossil fuel as we do. He did not realize how good the oil companies would be at giving us what we ask for. This is just for comparison. In the US, we throw away a lot of things. Per person per year, we throw away 1/2 ton of trash. We throw away 16 tons of CO2 from our fossil fuels. 16 tons per person. And you're only 4 tons in Ecuador, but it's 4 tons per person. This is changing the climate. I will come back to the good news if we deal with this efficiently. If we do not, the climate changes that are coming will be bigger than what's happened. A small climate change, there are some winners as well as losers. A big climate change, it's mostly losers. The costs rise faster than the temperature, so it's a super linear thing. This is science. There are uncertainties, but it could only be a little better than I'm going to tell you, and it could be a lot worse. So the uncertainties are mainly on the bad side, and I will show you this a little bit. Okay. What do we worry about? Heat stress on people, heat stress on wildlife, heat stress on crops, sea level rise. Warmer air can rain harder because it has more water, so you get more floods. It then dries out faster when it's warmer, so you get more droughts. The strongest storms can get stronger. It is easier for many diseases to spread. We will drive extinctions, and it especially hurts the people who are not causing the change. And this is somewhere that I'll show you something that does not make my country look great. These are just data, these are correlations, but they are believed to be caused. So if you go to India, where it's hot, where people do not have air conditioners, as the temperature goes up, the death rate goes up. In many places in the tropics, as the temperature goes up, people are more likely to fight each other. Many of our crops, I show maize, but I could show rice and others, we grow most of them near the temperature they like, colder is not good, warmer is really bad. So you lose crop yield, you get unhappy people. This is a picture from Syria. Syria was an unhappy place. A drought arrived. The drought did not cause civil wars in neighboring countries. It contributed to a civil war in Syria. Do not say that drought caused the civil war, but drought made it more likely. We made that drought more likely already by changing the climate. Okay, so we increased the likelihood of a drought, double or triple. That caused unhappiness and people fought each other. This is, if we continue with global warming, what happens to drought by the time our students are old? Green is less drought. All other colors on this map are more drought, including where I live, including where you live, including in Syria, more drought. This is Miami. This is a high tide. It is not a storm. This is an octopus that swam into the parking garage. They call this nuisance flooding. It is not convenient to have this flood. At some point, this will get into the drinking water unless they spend a lot of money. At some point, this will force retreat of where people live in Bangladesh. At some point, this will become very expensive. This is New Orleans. This is a hurricane that did not get into the city. It stopped there. We will drive enough sea level rise to go over this. But my work on ice sheets is looking at whether we will have a big change that would raise sea level out of this picture, which is possible. The uncertainties could be a lot worse. So I have had the option to help the United Nations through the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This is us in Paris in 2007 at the UNESCO building. The committee was co-winner of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. There are many people from across the world who have helped this. I was a very small piece, but I did get my picture taken with important people here. So if you took our results and turned them into a tweet, this is what it would be. Two futures, one in which we use our knowledge, one in which we don't. If we use our knowledge, we get a larger economy. We get more jobs for people. We improve our health. We improve national security around the world. And the environment is cleaner and it is more ethical. That's what we can get if we use our knowledge well. I served on a committee with William Nordhaus. Bill is a fantastic person. He was the co-recipient of the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2018. He built tools to ask whether certain actions will help the economy. Those tools show that dealing efficiently with climate change is economically beneficial, very strongly. Okay? You'll meet someone who says, yes, climate is changing, we cannot afford to deal with it. The Nobel Prize says we cannot afford to ignore it. Dealing with it efficiently is economically beneficial. This is for the US. We have people making electricity from coal and oil and gas who have good jobs. I liked the oil company when I worked with them. But when you put money into alternatives, they make more jobs. And this seems to be, at least in part, because the fossil fuels, more of the cost goes to whoever controls the resource rather than whoever makes the resource useful. This is not, the scholarship on jobs is still evolving. I'm not an expert, so I will not tell you this is absolutely certain, but that's what it looks like now, is that moving away from fossil fuels will lose some good jobs, but it will make more good jobs in other areas by redirecting more of the money to workers. This is people working with the International Monetary Fund who said, so is pricing fair? Are we really having a fair competition between renewables and fossil fuels? And they said no. In fact, the world is putting huge subsidies into fossil fuels. A lot of that is through allowing them to hurt health and not pay for it. And they said if we got rid of the subsidies for fossil fuels, it would cut worldwide air pollution deaths by more than half. Right? And that's a big thing. It would also help the well-being of people by making fair pricing. Environmentally, if we continue warming, this is a study, there are many like this, maybe a third of species will be committed to extinction by the middle of this century if we do not slow the warming. They live where they want to, the climate changes, they can't change fast enough. And this one, so up here, red is a lot of climate change. We're causing it. We're causing it. Blue is not much. So this is how much CO2 per person. Red is a lot, blue is a little. Down here is an estimate of how much people will be hurt by the climate change. Red is a lot and blue is a little. And what you'll notice is that the people who are changing climate the most tend to be the people who are hurt least by the changing climate. This has caused many leaders. I've quoted Pope Francis here. He's amazing on this topic. He said, we believe in the golden rule. This is wrong. Right? And it's so Pope Francis has said, no, you cannot leave this to future generations if you just look at this map. Okay. So with that, remember, if we can deal with this effectively, we can improve the economy, we can improve jobs and health and security and the environment and the golden rule. So how could we do that? And I'm going to show you a few things. This is not all of the answers, but I'll show you a few things. So where do we get our food? Everything in color on these two maps feeds us. Orange is where we grow crops. Green is where we graze animals. Everything in color feeds us. Suppose that we replaced all the oil and the coal and the gas with modern solar, and then we build more so that people can have extra. How much would we need of modern solar to replace every bit of energy used on Earth? I put the thing in the Sahara. You would not, you will have some in Pennsylvania and you'll have some in Ecuador. But that much solar cell, that little pink square, is all the energy used by all humans on Earth plus some. Now, it's huge. The solar cells on our roof are very small compared to that piece of the Sahara. It is surely a huge task, but it's doable now. In 30 years, we could do that. And it's economically doable now. So there are other things coming. I made some television shows I helped do called Earth, the Operator's Manual. And we talked to some ranchers. They had put about 5% of their land into wind turbines. They had left 95% of their land in ranching. The wind turbines gave them more money than the ranching. If we put a wind farm on the windy parts of the plains and deserts of the world, that is 5 times more energy than is used by all humans. The International Energy Agency 2020 report says that now the best solar energy is the cheapest electricity in history. It is cheaper than coal and gas in most countries, and wind is in many countries too. Here's a history of oil and gasoline prices, 92 up till recently, bouncing around. Here's a history of solar prices, right? We're still learning. The prices are still going down, and they are now cheaper. To add a little marginal electricity to the grid is cheaper in most of the world to add renewables. This is very new. How good it will be, we're not sure. But there are many crops that do not want full sun. They want part sun. And there are many parts of the world where water stress is very large. In those places, putting solar over your farm may generate more food and solar energy. And that worked. This is in Oregon, and that worked in this place. The snow stayed under the solar cells, and they got an extra cutting of hay. Some folks in Germany did this. They built solar cells high enough that the tractors could drive underneath. They then had a drought, and the region with the solar cells raised more food than the region without solar cells. And it generated solar energy. Okay. Building a sustainable future is going to be very hard. There are all sorts of big questions to be solved, but we now know that we can do it. It's going to take really big upfront investments. Solar is hard to pay for initially, and then it works for 30 years, and it's just fine. It must be customized locally. It has to work for you where you are. There are real political difficulties. If you lose a job with an oil company and you get 2 jobs with a solar company, the person who loses their jobs knows who they are. And the people who get the new jobs are still in school and they don't. So there's real political difficulties. This is not easy. There has never been a bigger need for accurate information and for forward-looking people who know how to do things like this. But we are the first generation in human history that knows that we could build a sustainable energy system and that we can do that in ways that will help the economy as well as the environment. And so I will stop. I think this is really good news, actually. We can do this. So thank you. I will stop sharing and we'll see where we can go.
Wow, Richard, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. You know, in this conference, there are many business leaders and bank representatives and scholars and academia and young people, you know. And it's a very diverse conference, and I believe that each one of the people here got their message, and yeah, it was actually even emotional. So yeah, thank you so much, Richard. So now we open the space for questions and answers. Okay, I will open the ability for people to post a question in the chat, and then I will be, with the help of the translator, asking you the question. All right. So, para los que tengan preguntas, ahorita es el momento, pueden hacer en el chat cualquier pregunta que deseen a Richard y aquí les traducimos. Okay, so
Right. Hydroelectric is an excellent excellent source in many places. There isn't enough hydroelectric to really run your country into the future. As you grow, as you use more electricity, it's harder to grow hydroelectric. The total energy in the sun that reaches the top of our atmosphere is about 10,000 times more than the energy that humans use. About 1% of the sun goes into wind, so there's 100 times more wind than the energy we use. Hydroelectric is actually smaller than the total human use, but it really works in some places, as you well know. And right now, there's more hydroelectric in the world than any other renewable. My suspicion is that eventually we're going to use the water for food. And you're going to want to release the water to the farmers for irrigation when they need to grow food, not when we need to do power. In Pennsylvania, where I am, no farmer now irrigates. We don't put water on our fields, but I'm a home gardener and I water my garden because it grows more food. And when the world gets hungry, we're going to irrigate in more places because we're going to need the food. So my guess is that we should be happy with the hydroelectric we have, but we shouldn't count on large expansions of that going forward, that probably we're going to have other uses for that water. And let's see, so, and I'm sorry, my Spanish is probably not quite good enough. So Rodrigo, if you're willing to help there, or Jacob, that would be good.
So basically, the second question is so many people, what is your favorite strategy to convince people to stop harming the environment? Because many people now especially know this, that they're harming it, but they still don't care.
Right. The people who care are already trying to help. The people who don't care, I believe, are worried about other things. And some of them worry about jobs, and some of them worry about money. So I really believe it is finding out what they worry about and then showing them how caring will help on that. And because right now, helping the economy and making the Pope happy are in the same direction. Find out what they're worried about and then show them how wise response will help. I think that's the answer, is is the people who are really worried about ethics or the environment are already working very hard. The people who are not worried about that may be worried about climate refugees or jobs or something, and showing them how that we can help on those two is the most important thing.
Thank you, Richard. The next question is in English. It says, what should be the strategy / recipe? It could be academia, political, social, or economical for a country like Ecuador to install and run sustainable energy systems like the ones used in high-income countries like Germany.
Yeah, I mean, and this is probably the biggest problem, is that the upfront costs of renewable energy. Conservation is very good, but really it is the upfront costs. And I don't know the answer. I wish I did. I think, though, that the fact that there's 150 of us having this chat right now, and that it is hosted by a bank, is a remarkably optimistic sign that there are people, good people there, who are thinking how to make this work. We do have solar cells on our roof. It hurt a little to buy them, but our advisor said this is a good investment for you. If our politics were different, I could have had a better investment. So putting the solar cells on our roof was actually more expensive than it would have been to put them over the local dairy farm and allow the cows to graze underneath and have many of us share in a community solar. And right now that is hard to do where I live because the political laws are not right for us to have community solar easily. But the idea of, do we get people together and build efficiently, because it's more efficient to have 50 of us pay for solar cells over the farm, put them there where they will help the cattle by giving shade, save the farm, and save me money.
Thank you. The next question is, nuclear energy works, but how do we deal with the waste?
Right. So no one has really solved the waste problem. And right now, nuclear, while it works very well, is not economical. There are people who think that it will become so, but right now, in the United States, it is cheaper to build a new wind farm to make electricity than it is to keep running nuclear plants that have already been built and paid for and just have maintenance costs. Building new nuclear is not competitive at this point. And so you will find many people who still deeply believe in nuclear. I'm very happy that there are people at universities looking for new ways to deal with it. But I don't think it's a big piece of the solutions right now because it's really not ready. And because we do have this lack of agreement and trust in how we will deal with the waste. Even our very best industries, Volkswagen or someone, have made mistakes that were not good. And I don't want to pick on them in particular. There were some scandals about pollution control devices. I had NASA on my first slide. I deeply love NASA. I respect them. They made some mistakes and some people died in an explosion because of mistakes they made. No matter how hard we work, even our best organizations and companies sometimes make mistakes. If you made a mistake with wind turbines, they might break and fall down. And if you made a mistake with solar cells, they might not work. And if you make a mistake with nuclear waste or nuclear power, it may cause very large problems. And so I think in terms of moving forward politically, that it is probably easier to learn how to put solar cells on a farm than it is to put a nuclear plant in someone's backyard.
Thank you, Richard. The next question, I'm gonna tie two questions because they're a little correlated. So basically it's about the contamination caused by this production of solar panels, and it complements, do you think that the overall, those would be less harmful to the environment than
Yes.
what we're doing?
So very real problems. We need rare earth elements. We need lithium for batteries. They are going to cause mining problems. We need to figure out how to recycle. These are not easy problems. My discussions with people who work on these say that we can solve them. That they're not, we can get to recycling fairly easily. We may figure out how yet to recycle wind turbines. Solar cells will be recyclable fairly clearly. There's an immense amount of work on learning enough material science that we can use more common elements to do what we want. And there's a lot of progress in that area that we will see. Perovskite solar cells that we will see, which is structures that may make it chemically easier, that we will see batteries that use less lithium and that may switch off of that largely. So I'm optimistic that we'll get there. The fact that the engineers are so important in this future, right? The engineering students, yes, thank you, we need you. In the worst way, and at the discovery level where science meets engineering as well as the application level. So the rush to get solar has not worried too much about recycling. People are now thinking seriously about that. It is not worried too much about the rare elements. We're now thinking about that. I believe we will solve those problems, but I hope that you have a few students in looking at material science in your university.
Definitely. If not, they can go to Penn State. We have a good program there. So then it's something about the hydroelectrics. It causes a lot of harm to natural water rivers. So maybe you can shortly explain a little bit how hydroelectric power actually is not harm-proof for the environment.
It's certainly true. I mean, we rely on rivers for so many things and for so much biodiversity. And when you change that river, you may lose biodiversity along the river. There are other issues. Of course, there's safety. You have to build the dam properly. In many places, and this is not as big a problem for you, but in many places, the evaporation from the reservoir is important. And you lose a lot of water because you just have this huge amount of water sitting out there with a dry wind blowing over it. In many places, there are rivers flow across borders. And if you build a dam on your side of the border and take the water and use it to grow food for you, less water is in the river, and when that river goes into someone else's country, they get less water, and now they're very unhappy with you. And there are experts on international relations who are worried about water wars related to hydroelectric power schemes in some Asia and Africa, in some parts of the world. This is a real problem. And so, you know, as a widespread thing, there are big issues that come up with this. So, like I say, my suspicion is that a river that gets to the sea, in some sense, is food that was not grown on land in most of the world. And so my suspicion is hydroelectric will not be a huge part of the solutions going forward for energy, because we're going to use it for food.
Thank you, Richard. The next question, it's a compliment and a question. It says, by the way, you're a great communicator. Thank you. And if we can have access to the slides, and yeah, maybe.
I'm happy to send them to you, Jacob, and you can make them available as appropriate, yes.
Thank you so much, Richard. The next question would be, in your opinion, how do you see the world in 10 years, specifically biodiversity related?
Yeah. It is very worrisome, because we really are causing a large problem for biodiversity. And it's, yeah, in the US, we cut a lot of our trees, but little areas were there, and now we've allowed them to grow back, and we're doing okay. But if we went to cutting the trees again, we will kill things. And we see this happening in other parts of the world. And so doing better with the land we're farming and doing better with making energy, I think, are really important in preserving biodiversity. We can't, if we quit using oil and went to trees, it would be worse. We need to get more food off of the land we farm, so that we don't need to cut into the forest to make more farmland. And we need to get energy from the areas that we've already changed, so that we can leave some things wild. So biodiversity, right now, we are in the really critical time. The next small number of decades are really important for this.
Thank you, Richard. The next question is also a combined question. Given that Ecuador does not have that much foreign investment, how can individuals go for solar energy in an individual use?
Yeah. It's hard, and I wish I knew. So, so I'm hoping, and I'm confident of this, right? So I am confident that those of you who were on here are now thinking about, how can we do this in Ecuador? And that is really the answer. If I knew the answer, you don't want me to bring it in anyway. You're going to grow this at home in a way that works for you, and in a way that is acceptable for you, and you can do it better than I possibly could. But I don't have the answer. I'm a geologist, and I'm still worrying about collapsing ice sheets, so I don't really know what to tell you. But I do, like I say, that doing it individually can work. Doing it in groups is more efficient. So when they put solar cells on our roof, it is a slow, difficult process. They had to wire it into our house, and they had to drill into the roof supports at our house. If we had built community solar, many of us could have gone together. It would have been more efficient. It would have required less investment. The price would have been lower, and we would share the consequences. So I'm very intrigued by the community scale. If it is, so the most efficient are giant industrial installations of solar, but I'm very intrigued by the community scale, and by putting solar in places that you can get two uses. And I don't know how that's done for you in Ecuador, but we have a place just out of town that they have put solar over the parking lot. And this keeps snow off the parking lot, and it keeps the cars parked there cool in the summer because they're in the shade. And you had to have a parking lot. Why not put solar over it? The parking lot is now worth more because it has solar over it. We have places that you go out in the Western US and they worry about snow drifts. and they have snow fences. Why not put solar on the snow fence? Right? So it's finding the thing that works there and combining them.
Thank you, Richard. Really, you're really wise. Like solutions that don't necessarily work in Ecuador that may work in the U.S. We have different problems.
Yeah, you will not have snow fences.
Yeah, correct. But yeah, the next question is, let me see here. They're a little repeated. Oh yeah, what about meat consumption? How do you consider meat consumption in the effect of climate change?
Right. So it is very clear that some meat, especially beef, asado, is more CO2. It's worse for the environment, and we like it. It is very clear that if we ate less of it, we would be healthier. This is people who eat a lot of beef tend to get health problems. So moving to meats that are better, or moving towards vegetables, is good for us. It's good for the environment. It is a very hard subject to bring up with some people. And in the US, if I said, I'm coming to take away your cheeseburger and your steak, that would be the end of the discussion. So what, learning better ways. When in the US, when people are given alternatives to the cheeseburger and steak, they don't quit eating steak, but they do reduce consumption a lot when there are good alternatives. So some of it is learning to cook better with other things, making knowledge available to people on the health benefits as well as the environmental benefits. And then eventually, if we got rid of those subsidies for fossil fuels, you would see people eating more chicken and less beef because of price signals.
Thank you, Richard. And the last question, I skipped some, but this one is something interesting. So, you know, Ecuador is a land of volcanoes. And when you come visit, I will give you a great tour. But what do you think geothermal energy and how do you see that type of energy?
It really works in some places. So when we did our TV shows, we filmed at a geothermal plant in New Zealand that was working wonderfully. It works in Iceland, it works in California. It works in those places that have large resource. And so yes, that is a possibility there. There is a possibility that we will learn going forward how to do hot, dry rock, and that we will learn to do it cheaply enough, in which case everyone everywhere could do geothermal. That is not competitive yet, but it's an interesting research. But in the places that have a large resource, it does seem to work well. And so in New Zealand, Iceland, parts of California, it is competitive or cheaper than other sources. It will be pressed because the price of wind and sun is going down so rapidly that whether we will learn to drive down the price of geothermal rapidly is a good question. But it is surely one that is worth looking at. My suspicion is that the future will have more wind and sun, in part just because they're more flexible. You start looking at a grid with lots of sources, with lots of localization. You start looking at an electric system that is a little like the internet. Anybody can participate. You can just buy. You can generate your own and put it on the grid. You can, if you have an electric car, you could become part of the storage that stabilizes the grid. If you are a large institution and you have many cars, you can help fund your institution by letting your electric vehicles be paid for by the electric grid. And in that case, I think you'll see more of the distributed generation from wind and sun, but that's a guess. I don't know that for a fact.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. In the honor of time, we want to thank you again for sharing your knowledge and your perspective and your hopeful message, you know, for us in Ecuador. And we hope to have you in another occasion. When you can travel, please count me in. I will give you a very special tour. And then, yeah, have a great day, Richard. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias.
Bye. Gracias a todos por la conferencia. Ya nos vemos. Chao.